start with the new details on the deadliest terror attack in New York City since 9/11. Police say a 29-year-old immigrant from Uzbekistan plowed his rented truck into pedestrians on a busy bike path in Lower Manhattan yesterday. Chilling eyewitness video shows the suspect during that attack, which unfolded just blocks from the World Trade Center. 8 people are dead, including children. 11 others injured. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith, Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov, and today's #OneLuckyGuy, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano is here outnumbered. A tough day for New York and for the nation.
Well, it sure is. I mean, it brings back the horrific memories of those of us who were here on 9/11. It also brings back the gratitude of the great professionals that keep us safe.
Indeed.
Friends have been asking me if I feel nervous in the streets. I don't.
All right, we'll get into it.
I know we have a lot to get into.
And get back to you. The suspect is now in the hospital after police shot him in the abdomen. And just in the past hour, New York City officials provided an update on the investigation, saying the suspect planned this attack for weeks. Watch.
What happened yesterday was not okay. It will never be something any of us will just accept as inevitable. Since 9/11, we, again along with our partners at the local, state, and federal level, have disrupted or prevented 24 plots against New York City. But none of that matters when 8 innocent lives are taken by a criminal committing a cowardly act driving a rental truck.
This was an attack on the United States of America, an attack on New York City, an attack on our people, and it was the definition of terrorism.
Witnesses described that scene after the terrorists unleashed carnage on one of the busiest areas of our nation's largest city.
We were having class, and a couple of my classmates, we heard the shots, and then we went to the window and we seen 2 of the bodies lying down.
It surprised us because, you usually never see something like this happening around here, especially around here. So, we just looked outside the window and they were just laying there, dead.
David Lee Miller is live in Lower Manhattan with the latest. David Lee?
Harris, that news conference lasted nearly 1 hour, and for the first time now we are getting some very detailed information about the 29-year-old suspect, Sayfullo Saipov. The authorities say that he followed essentially to a T the ISIS playbook on how to perpetrate an act of terror. They set forth a very elaborate timeline. They said that yesterday at 2:06 p.m. he rented the truck that he later used as a weapon of mass destruction. At 2:43 he then entered New York City over the George Washington Bridge, and at 3:04 that is when the rampage began. That's when he used that rental truck, as I said, as a weapon of mass destruction, and he began to plow down both cyclists as well as pedestrians along New York's West Side Highway. The authorities today also talked in detail about some of the things he had in his possession at the time of the attack. Let's start with some of the weapons. Here now is the Deputy Police Commissioner John Miller addressing some of the weapons that authorities found. Listen.
There have been a number of search warrants executed, and there may be more. Witnesses interviewed, associates tracked down, and other activity. We've been able to piece together a number of facts. Recovered in and around the vehicle were multiple knives, the 2 imitation pistols, one a paintball gun, the other a Crossman pellet gun.
And authorities said that the 29-year-old suspect has never been the subject of an NYPD or FBI investigation, but they did say there was some connectivity, that is a quote, to subjects that were under investigation. And they also talked about the note that was found in his vehicle. They say the note was written in Arabic. The subject is from Uzbekistan, so that perhaps speaks to the level of his radicalization, although they would not elaborate. The note said the Islamic State would endure forever. Now, we also heard more from the police commissioner. Let's listen to some of the other things he had to say.
Based on the investigation overnight, it appears that Mr. Saipov had been planning this for a number of weeks. He did this in the name of ISIS, and along with the other items recovered at the scene was some notes that further indicate that.
And one of the things worth noting now, Harris, is we're approaching about 20 hours since the attack took place. And here in Lower Manhattan, in Tribeca, a significant portion of this city is still sealed off. Just down the street from where I am now standing, sitting in the middle of the street, is the rental truck that was used to kill as many as 8 people. Authorities very methodically, slowly, deliberately continuing their investigation. They say they are checking surveillance cameras. They say they are checking the license plate readers. What's taking place now on the ground, in essence, is a grid search. They are looking for any and all evidence. And interestingly, one of the things they said that I can't remember the last time I've heard authorities say is that they are asking members of the public to come forward with any photographs or video that may be helpful in this investigation. Harris?
Yeah, you know, David Lee, that goes to the first question I wanted to ask you about. And so much of what we have seen and know about this came from, I mean, if you saw it on social media, so many people had phones there. So the advent of social media now broadens their ability to collect information. What are they saying about it?
That's right. They're simply now asking for anyone who has this material to come forward. One of the things that I discovered yesterday, because I was down here minutes after the rampage ended, is that there were students in a nearby high school overlooking the site where the shooting itself took place, Stuyvesant High School. And I talked to some of the students, and they told me that they were in lockdown for about 3 hours, but many of the students through the windows were able to observe what was taking place. Many of them had cameras and phones with them, and they documented much of what they saw. One young girl, a 17-year-old girl who went to Stuyvesant High School, told me she didn't think it was possible for a bicycle to be so twisted and damaged. And then she described to me that a few feet away from this bicycle, or what remained of one, were at least 2 bodies in body bags. It was an absolutely horrific sight that the students from Stuyvesant High School observed as they were under lockdown for their own protection. Harris?
David, it's Sandra Smith. When you point that out, it reminds me, knowing that neighborhood so well, of just how many students are walking about that time of day, 3 p.m. Eastern time. There's a community college right across the street there as well. Many of us are familiar with that area. We're showing these live shots there now, and it looks like the area is buzzing. And talking to Bill Hemmer this morning there during America's Newsroom, people are back out on the sidewalks. They are going about their daily business, whether that's to school or doctor's appointments or the grocery stores. It's amazing to see how fast, even though still areas are siphoned off there and you can't access some areas, how many people are going right back to their daily business.
You make a very good point. If you were to venture just 1 block from here, you wouldn't think that anything this horrible had taken place. The streets are teeming with people, and to a great extent, life goes on outside the perimeter that is now sealed off. Also, you have to take into consideration, as you pointed out, that there are many schools here. There's the community college you talk about, there's Stuyvesant High School, and there's also another school, at least 3 schools within a block radius of where the rampage ended. It is noteworthy that more lives were not lost. This could have been even more horrific than it was. Another thing that should be pointed out during this news conference today, authorities hailed the police officer, Brian Nash, 28 years old, a 5-year veteran. They described him as a hero. He used his service weapon to end this rampage. Had he not been here at this time and thought so quickly, more lives could have been lost, possibly even school children, because remember, this unfolded a little bit after 3 o'clock, when many of these kids would otherwise have been leaving school. Back to you.
David Lee Miller, thank you for your coverage there on the ground. And I mean, it's been such a short time still since this attack took place, and how busy that area already is.
Before we get into the many legal issues here, it does seem as though the crash with the school bus is what stopped him. And stopped him from killing many, many more people. Now, I know people were injured on the school bus, but because that school bus was there, other innocent lives were saved.
There was 2 adults and 2 school children on that bus who were injured and taken to area hospitals, Judge, and we continue to get updates on that.
So at that point after the crash is when he runs with weapons in his hands that really can't hurt anybody and certainly are not going to stop the police. That's a head scratcher. What's he doing with a BB gun and a paint gun? And that's when the police, thinking these are real weapons, shoot him and stop him.
Right. Well, and I mean, you can tell by some of the video, Lisa, that's already online. I mean, it was pretty quickly last night. A lot of people were out with their cameras because it was Halloween. Some people were already out in costume early part of the day, so you had a lot of people already snapping away and rolling video, more maybe than they normally would be. But what we could see from that video wasn't necessarily so much the weapon, but it was the skulking. And you could tell that this was somebody fleeing something from seeing that. And then you had the weapons that were useless, but certainly police fired on him.
And I certainly, you know, we've heard some of the witness accounts, and I just cannot imagine being there. But on sort of a different note, hearing the press conference this morning, I was sort of dismayed in hearing that Islam is not responsible for this. What do you think inspired this terrorist to commit these acts? You know, if it's not the Taliban, if it's not Al-Qaeda, it's ISIS. And what do all of these radical extremists share? A common ideology, a common radical version of their religion. And you look at the ISIS leader, he has a degree in Islamic studies. He has a PhD and a master's in Quranic studies. This is what he teaches, and this is what he has inspired tens of thousands of people to sign up for jihadism. And I think Tom Rogan, he wrote for the National Review, and I thought this was such an interesting point he made, that it's not about the geography and the terrain in which they control. It's about the minds that they control.
Yes, although I would step in and say this. When you take out a scorpion's nest, the scorpions flee and they go someplace else. And they may not be able to hit you, but because of social media and other things that we can't even see online, like black sites, because they are so interconnected now, they become more dangerous than ever. So, yes, I think it's important, though, that our military took out Raqqa. That's important to have hit their caliphate. I want to get Jessica into the conversation here. Jess?
Well, I grew up in Tribeca. I live in Tribeca. This is deeply personal to me. My parents' building was on lockdown last night. Hard for me to get home, and you know, hard to see
Parents
this.
could not get in and out of their apartment building?
No, they actually were away right now, but no one was going in and out on River Terrace, which is the block right behind Stuyvesant. So this, it is different when it's where you're from, and I know that all of us feel that, being New Yorkers, and thank you for visiting from D.C.
I live in Jersey, but I'm here every day.
Yeah, I count you. So I think that we obviously are keeping that in mind as we discuss this. To Lisa's point, I know we're going to get into more of the politicization of this later in the show. I take your point about the press conference. I also counter with the point that the President of the United States of America politicized it at record time and didn't want to say anything about what happened in Las Vegas when we know how many people are killed by crazy white men with guns.
Judge, I want you to rebut that a bit, because you were talking about it before we went live here.
Well,
or just your thoughts. Maybe they're not a rebuttal.
You know, no, it's not a rebuttal. In fact,
No, we agree on
I
this.
happen to agree with Jessica. I mean, the president uses Twitter more effectively than anybody in the land, but to
Honestly,
blame this on Chuck Schumer because of a piece of legislation that Republicans passed and a Republican president signed in 1990 is not going to advance the ball.
I feel like it's too soon for us to even go there. At the very beginning
Well,
of
we're just reporting on what they said.
Pointing out but pointing out what is inspiring these individuals to commit this act is not political. Like we're not going to.
Then why? What about
It is
access
about an
to
ideology.
Yes,
No,
of course
Jessica,
it is.
it's not
What about
about
mental health is an ideology problem too, as well. I mean,
Jessica.
these people who have access to guns that they have no business having.
Wait a minute.
This
was a truck.
I love you, but
This was a truck.
Wait, hold on. We're all talking over each other. The bottom line is what we were talking about before we even started the show, Judge. And while you were watching that news conference, you were appalled at how many red flags they stood up there and told us there were. And this attack still played out.
They told us that the attack was planned for weeks. That means he used his mobile device. He spoke to people. He communicated with people. He purchased goods. He rented the truck. How could intelligence agents have not picked this up with weeks of planning when the NSA supposedly exists for our safety and it captures everything we say and do on these cell phones of everybody in the United States, everybody watching us now, including this guy, and it's information overload. They were not able to target him because they captured everybody.
That's part of the argument that you and others have made, that they scooped up so much they can't even extrapolate, they can't even go through all of it. Right. We'll talk more about politics later. We'll talk about the news conference and some things that were said. But right now, let's let the victims be the last word on this. Our prayers with those who are surviving and the families of those who did not. We'll move on. New questions about how the suspect came to the United States as sources tell Fox News he appears to have some connection to other individuals police were already tracking. Catherine Herridge with the details on that part of our coverage ahead. As we continue to follow the fast-moving developments after yesterday's terror rampage in the shadows of the World Trade Center.
It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I hear all the noise, and when I go back and I look, I see, a truck a few more blocks down going down the bike path. And for some reason, I went that way. And when I went that way, I seen a couple of bodies laying right.
And yesterday's terror attack in New York followed ISIS's playbook to a T and was radicalized domestically. And now sources telling Fox News the suspect also appears to be connected to other individuals already on law enforcement's radar. We're also learning he came to the U.S. from Uzbekistan on a diversity visa. That program provides up to 50,000 randomly selected foreigners permanent residency in the U.S. each year and makes a set number of visas available to low admission countries. They then undergo reviews by the State Department and DHS, with the process taking about 2 years. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington with more on this. A lot of debate on this today. Catherine?
Well, thanks, Sandra. Based on preliminary evidence, we learned in the last hour that the suspect planned the attack for weeks, left these handwritten notes at the scene in Arabic with symbols and words expressing his belief that the Islamic State would endure forever. Fox News reported earlier today that the suspect had connections to individuals who are already known to federal law enforcement. A short time ago, New York's Deputy Commissioner for Counterterrorism fleshed out details.
Mr. Saipov has never been the subject of an NYPD Intelligence Bureau investigation, nor has he been the subject of an FBI investigation. It appears he will have some connectivity to individuals who were the subjects of investigation, though he himself was not.
Information in the last hour shows this is not a standard investigation. It's pulling together resources from the Joint Terrorism Task Force in New York and New Jersey, with leads getting pushed out to federal agents in other states. The suspect, as you mentioned, came into the U.S. in March 2010, a citizen from the former Soviet Republic of Uzbekistan. Saipov is a legal permanent resident, or what's called an LPR in law enforcement circles. This morning, the Republican chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee was asked about reports the suspect did come through this diversity program.
The lottery system, I've always been against it because it's a random system to bring people into the United States. It's not merit-based. Why aren't we, scrutinizing people over there before they can even get into the country with a higher vetting system, putting ICE agents over in consulate and embassy offices?
Source close to the matter says law enforcement is scrubbing the suspect's electronics, and already they've seen evidence that he was searching online for ISIS instructions for using trucks as weapons. Sandra.
All right, Catherine Herridge, thank you for the update there. We'll see you again in a bit.
And
Judge.
I'm getting angry here because of the accuracy of Catherine's report, which is telling me that government should have known about this. He's going online looking for ISIS material and ISIS instructions about how to use a truck to kill people. So if the NSA is capturing everything he's doing, why aren't they finding that? And why aren't they telling the NYPD about it, or the Patterson Police Department, which is where this guy was at the time before he
But
killed
would the government's response be, we can't possibly follow up on every single instance of that?
Yes, and the reason that is an accurate response is because the government surveils everybody. It's bulk surveillance rather than focusing on people.
So,
as Catherine said, they merely typed his name into a government website and it popped up 5 times. They could have done that 3 weeks ago.
can I ask you just about this element of it? Because maybe this is not fair in terms of where investigators go. I don't know. But over the last 2 years, a terrorism investigation by the FBI looked at 5 people, most of whom were from Uzbekistan, in a terror investigation. Some of them pleaded guilty to some charges.
Right.
There was no record then whether or not Saipov, the suspect in all of this that happened yesterday, knew of these men or was connected with them. But is it fair then in the nation, when you know you have many from one area, in one investigation. Do you go looking for other Uzbeks in the United States that may or may not have a record? What is the fairness? What's the legality in that?
It's very difficult to do that. That's a great question, Harris. It's very difficult to do that when he is already a legal permanent resident of the United States, which gives him, with the exception of voting and running for office, the same rights as the rest of us do. So therefore, translate, the government could not commence an investigation of him without some suspicion. What would bring suspicion? The fact that he's looking for ISIS materials, the fact that he knows that he's looking on his computer for information about how to use a truck to kill people. But once you have that suspicion, that opens up the door to a surreptitious investigation of him.
Well, Judge, I have a question for you. So Chairman McCall on Special Report yesterday said that there's at least 1,000 individuals that we're looking at for suspected terrorism in all 50 states. So you had mentioned that we should have been able to flag this. We should have known about this, which it seems, we did, because obviously he was, there's records of this, or him. But is law enforcement just simply overwhelmed?
I think that the NSA, which is the Chief Domestic Intelligence Agency, I keep holding up my iPhone because this is the instrument that they're most interested in. We all use them for everything, texting, emailing, and talking. I think they are overwhelmed because they download too much information. If Catherine Herridge's people, can type this guy's name into a government website, as I said a few minutes ago, and his name pops up 5 times. If you were to add that to what the NYPD now knows about him and what the NSA knew about him 24 hours ago but didn't know that it knew it, we could have stopped this.
So what should have law enforcement then done with him? So if he is in the record, but, let's say we don't necessarily have specific details about him trying to put together this attack, what does law enforcement do with someone like that legally?
Okay, great question. If the police, let me say the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which without getting into too much detail, combines state and federal assets in New York City and northern New Jersey, state police, city police, FBI, and other entities. If they were aware of his existence and what he was doing, they could have monitored him, and they would have known that he went to a Home Depot to rent a truck, and they would have stopped the truck.
Well, also, it's interesting to me that against this backdrop, this conversation we're having, we have tech companies on Capitol Hill right now getting a good grilling. Dianne Feinstein was out this morning saying to the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, you made an amazing product, you changed the world, and now you've got a big problem on your hands, and you need to play a bigger role in helping us fix this. Because you say texting, emailing, tweeting, DMing.
But those are the phone companies, and that's Snapchat. A conversation that we had with San Bernardino. How are the phone companies going? Because that's a different thing than social media.
But
giving somebody the code to get in, the pathway to get into one of those phones if they need to.
All right. I want to alert in here because the president is holding a cabinet meeting right now at the White House. We know he is seated with Rex Tillerson and James Mattis on either side of him. We want to point this out because we're going to go to this in a second. He spoke for several minutes about the terrorist attack in New York City yesterday. He speaks about the diversity visa program. Then he talks taxes and goes into trade. Also, he says he will make Fed chair announcement tomorrow, so that is on target as well. And then he previews his trip to Asia. Remember, he is leaving on Sunday, first stop Japan, and says Mnuchin and Cohen are staying behind to keep working on taxes. He's asked questions. We are about to get to this. He asked questions about, will the suspect in this terrorist attack go to Gitmo? The president responds, will consider it. Is the family under investigation? They might be. And he continued to answer more questions. We're told he ignored a question further about the potential incoming Federal Reserve chairman. So we're just getting the details of this cabinet meeting. The president at the White House right now. Let's listen in.
In New York City, just blocks away from the site of the World Trade Center, a man drove a truck into a pedestrian bike path and murdered 8 people and injured very, very seriously at least 11 more. All of America is praying and grieving for the families who lost their precious loved ones. Horrible act. Our hearts break for them, and we pledge to renew our resolve in their memory. My administration is coordinating closely between federal and local officials to investigate the attack and to further investigate this animal who did the attacking. And updates will be provided as available. I am today starting the process of terminating the diversity lottery program. I'm going to ask Congress to immediately initiate work to get rid of this program. Diversity lottery. Diversity lottery sounds nice. It's not nice. It's not good. It's not good. It hasn't been good. We've been against it. So we want to immediately work with Congress on the diversity lottery program, on terminating it, getting rid of it. We want a merit-based program where people come into our country based on merit. And we want to get rid of chain migration. This man that came in, or whatever you want to call him, brought in with him other people. And he was the point of contact, the primary point of contact for, and this is preliminarily, 23 people that came in or potentially came in with him. And that's not acceptable. So we want to get rid of chain migration. And we've wanted to do that for a long time. And I've been wanting to do it for a long time. And we'll be asking Congress to start working on it immediately. There are bills already about ending chain migration. And we have a lot of good bills in there. We're being stopped by Democrats because they're obstructionists. And honestly, they don't want to do what's right for our country. We need strength. We need resolve. We have to stop it. So we're going to get rid of this lottery program as soon as possible. He came in through the diversity program, as you know, and we're going to stop that. We're going to, as quickly as possible, get rid of chain migration and go to a merit-based system. Terrorists are constantly seeking to strike our nation, and it will require the unflinching devotion to our law enforcement, homeland security, and intelligence professionals to keep America safe. We will take all necessary steps to protect our people and our communities and to protect our nation as a whole. We have to get much tougher. We have to get much smarter, and we have to get much less politically correct. We're so politically correct that we're afraid to do anything. And that's not only our country, that's other countries too that are having very similar problems. And we have to get tough, we have to get smart, we have to do what's right to protect our citizens. We will never waver in the defense of our beloved country, ever. And we'll never, ever forget the beautiful lives that have been taken from us. That was a horrible event, and we have to stop it, and we have to stop it cold. We also have to come up with punishment that's far quicker and far greater than the punishment these animals are getting right now. They'll go through court for years. At the end, there'll be who knows what happens. We need quick justice, and we need strong justice. Much quicker and much stronger than we have right now. Because what we have right now is a joke, and it's a laughingstock. And no wonder so much of this stuff takes place. And I think I can speak for plenty of other countries, too, that are in the same situation. So, with that being said, we will be starting our cabinet meeting today. It'll be a discussion that will focus on vital issues of tax cuts and tax reform. It'll be the largest tax cuts in the history of our country by far. The House is doing very well. They've taken an extra few hours, which will go into tomorrow, and they'll be announcing, and I'll probably be standing with them. We leave, as you know, for Asia. We're leaving on Friday morning. So I'll be standing with them sometime tomorrow. We'll be announcing massive tax cuts and reform. Not just tax cuts. It's tax cuts, which to me is the most important, but it'll be tax cuts and reform. We've now had 2 straight quarters of 3% or more economic growth, GDP. But our economy and our country cannot take off the way it really should. So it's really, really competitive with the rest of the world unless we get the kind of tax cuts for our companies and our middle class, our workers, unless we get the jobs we need. It can't really take off until we get the tax cuts and reform passed. This week, the House Ways and Means Committee will unveil a historic tax plan that will create new jobs, higher wages, which hasn't happened in many years, and now it's starting to happen. I'm happy to tell you, many, many years. People making less money today than they made 20 years ago. You've heard it many times before. But it'll lead to tremendous prosperity for American families, communities, and also for our job-producing businesses. At the center of our plan are tax cuts for the working Americans. We will reduce tax rates, increase the amount of income that is taxed at zero, and increase the child tax credit, which is very important to families. We'll make the tax code simple and fair so that the vast majority of Americans can file their taxes on a single sheet of paper. We will be simplifying, it'll be called simplification, our tax code. We will restore America's competitive edge by lowering taxes on America's businesses for the first time in more than 30 years, and it'll be a historic cut. Right now, other countries are so far below us, and then when you wonder, you see all these companies leaving, one after another, they leave. That's not going to be happening. And I must tell you, I've stopped it even before this, but we're going to be stopping it in full. People are coming back. We'll be announcing very shortly, possibly right after I get back, a major company that's moving back into the United States. It's going to be a major name. People are going to be very surprised, especially the country from which they're leaving will be surprised. Under our plan, we'll go from being one of the highest tax nations in the world to one of the lowest, meaning more jobs, more factories, more plants, more opportunities right here in America where we want them. We will reduce taxes for businesses of all sizes. I must add that we're also negotiating right now, we have my full team here, tremendously different trade deals. Our trade deals are horrible. They were made by people that, honestly, it's sad. It's very sad for our country. Every trade deal we have is disastrous. We're renegotiating our trade deals. And if we have support from Congress, we'll make trade deals that are horror shows into very good and respectable trade deals, and trade deals that are good for both countries and, in fact, many countries. But very important is that we renegotiate our trade deals. With Mexico, as an example, we have a trade deficit of $71 billion. That's NAFTA. We have trade deficits with China that are through the roof. They're so big and so bad that it's embarrassing saying what the number is, but you know what the number is. And I don't want to embarrass anybody 4 days before I land in China. But it's horrible. And you look all over the world, no matter where we do trade, we have bad trade deals. We're renegotiating those deals, as I said I would during the campaign. And that's going to be a big factor in our growth. Finally, our plan will bring back trillions of dollars from offshore. Trillions. We have, in my estimation, $4 trillion that will come pouring back into our country that will be put to work and will be spent by our companies that could never get the money back for many years. And interestingly, it's something that Republicans and Democrats have agreed on for years, bring the money back. What's not to agree? Bring the money back. And they couldn't get it done because there was a lack of leadership. They couldn't get it done. They all agreed it should be done. They couldn't get it done. So we will be bringing that money back for rebuilding America. I'll be announcing tomorrow the new head of the Federal Reserve. That'll take place sometime tomorrow afternoon. You'll be notified as to the time. I think you'll be extremely impressed by this person. As part of our push to renew our prosperity, I'll also be making a very historic trip on Friday, as I said. Our visit will take us to Japan, South Korea, China, Vietnam, the Philippines. You remember the Philippine last trip made by a president that turned out to be not so good, never quite got to land. And we will host meetings with world leaders across the Indo-Pacific region. I look forward to it. We're going to meet a lot of presidents and leaders of countries that have been friends and have become very good friends of mine. And we have great trade relationships, other than the fact that we are right now being taken advantage of, but I think they'll start changing them pretty quickly. Key administration officials, including Secretary Mnuchin and Gary Cohn, will be staying back from the trip to Asia to remain vigilant and making sure the tax cuts pass. So if I have any problems, I will be blaming Mnuchin and Cohn. Believe me, they'll be hearing from it. But I think they're going to do very well. We are doing very well. And the Houses, I must tell you, they've been working really hard. And they're coming up with a great plan. And the Senate's coming up with a great plan. And they're going to be put together, and something's going to come out of that will be, I think, really, really something very special. Again, we're doing Senate, we're doing a House. It's put together, and then we have our beautiful new tax cuts and reform, and I think that'll be very special. I'm also counting on our great Vice President, Mike Pence, and the rest of my cabinet to continue to push for the tax cuts and the reform while I'm away. And they're going to be all over the country. They'll be all over the country working on it. But specifically, they'll be working on the members of the House, members of the Senate. We think we'll actually get some Democrats to join us in the Senate because, frankly, I actually think they'll lose their elections in those communities and those states because the people of those states and the people of all states need tax cuts. Again, we're the highest tax nation just about in the world. We need tax cuts. So with that, we'll start our cabinet meeting. We have a wonderful group of people. We have a great cabinet. They're doing an incredible job. I don't think actually they've been given the credit that they deserve, but that doesn't matter quite yet. We'll let you know when it's time to tell you about it. But we have done. At the border, we've done a fantastic job. We've done great with the military. ISIS is being decimated. They're being decimated. But they quickly moved to other places in the world, like Africa and others, and we're there to meet them. This has never happened. We have done more to annihilate ISIS than 8 years of the previous administration. So we are doing a real job. We're actually making tremendous strides in Afghanistan also, and I think you see what's happening. You see what's happening. So we've done a largely, really a job that's been very, very well respected by many. One of the things that has happened that nobody is paying attention to, but you're going to see it this week, are judges, federal judges. Not only Justice Gorsuch, who's doing fantastically on the Supreme Court, but we have many judges that are being approved at the district level, federal district judges and Court of Appeals judges. We'll have, at this moment, we'll be up to fairly soon the approval of 145 federal judges, district, and Court of Appeals about 17 is at this moment. So we will have a big percentage of the court will be changed by this administration over a very short period of time. I don't believe, other than perhaps when they started the whole process, I don't believe anybody's come close. So we'll have 145, and that number will be increasing with time. 145 district court judges, and we'll have 17 Court of Appeals judges. And I must tell you, the Wall Street Journal gave us great reviews on that, really fantastic reviews, but I think it's a very important element that should be pointed out because a lot of people don't know it. So again, tomorrow is a big announcement, and we'll have another announcement having to do with the tax cuts. That'll be out tomorrow pretty early. And I appreciate it, and I will see many of you on the trip to Asia. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Thank you.
Mr. President, how do you want, Mr. President, do you want the assailant from New York sent to Gitmo?
Thank you, Major.
Mr. President?
I would certainly consider that, yes.
Are you considering that now?
I would certainly consider that. Send him to Gitmo. I would certainly consider that, yes.
And how did the diversity program fit into his plot, do you believe, sir?
Well, they say he came in through that program, so we'll see. We're looking at it, but they say he came in. Look, it's full. What we are demanding is merit-based immigration. We want people that are going to help our country. We want people that are going to keep our country safe. We don't want lotteries where the wrong people are in the lotteries. And guess what? Who are the suckers that get those people? And we want a merit-based system. And we do not want chain migration where somebody like him ultimately will be allowed to bring in many, many members of his family, and we don't want that. Thank you all very much.
Mr. President, do you believe any members of his family represent a threat? Do you believe any members of his family represent a threat to the country?
They could. They could. They certainly could.
Do you have intelligence to that effect, sir?
He did. They certainly could represent a threat. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, have you decided not to respond to Janet Yellen? Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. I think Janet Yellen is excellent. I think she's excellent. I didn't say that. I think she's excellent. Go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is Powell your choice?
Following yesterday's terrorist attack in New York City, the president, with Rex Tillerson and his defense secretary at his side, James Mattis, saying we have to get tough and do what's right for American citizens. Breaking news from the president just now. He said he wants to start the process of terminating that diversity program, the diversity lottery, as he referred to it. And he tweeted about this morning, calling it a Chuck Schumer beauty. It's a State Department program, calling it it's not nice, it's not nice, it's not good. We want a merit-based program for entering this country, come into this country based on merit. The president says he wants to get rid of chain migration, and he reiterated that multiple times. He moved on to Democrats, calling them obstructionists. He addressed tax reform, saying we will get beautiful new tax cuts and reforms. Now's the time to redouble our efforts. Ahead of that cabinet meeting, he also previewed his trip to Asia, which begins on Sunday. But we're going to open it up to the couch with this because, Judge, he ended by taking a couple questions. He said he was asked, is the suspect going to Gitmo? He responded, I'll consider it. He also said what we need is justice, and we need strong justice. What we have right now is a joke, said the president.
I profoundly disagree with him that what we have right now is a joke. The Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is operated out of Lower Manhattan, prosecutes terrorist suspects in federal courts in Manhattan. They have never lost a case. Many of the defendants have been sentenced to federal prison for the rest of their lives. They are superb prosecutors. They do provide swift, certain, and fair justice. Now, about Gitmo, this person, as horrific as he is a lawful American resident. He has the same rights, except for voting and running for office, as the rest of us. There is simply no provision for terminating his constitutional rights by putting him in the hands of the military and taking him to Gitmo.
Is that okay with you? I mean, obviously, you're going to tell me. I think
it is not okay with me, and it's not okay with the Constitution for the president or somebody in government to decide you don't have constitutional rights, we're sending you to Gitmo. He's horrible what he did. He killed innocent human beings. He will face justice. Look, if he's tried in the state courts here in New York, he cannot be exposed to the death penalty. If he's tried by the Joint Terrorism Task Force in Lower Manhattan for committing acts of terror in the United States of America, he is exposed to the death penalty. He probably will be convicted, and he can be executed. That would be fair, lawful, and constitutional. But if they send him to Cuba, it will be unfair, unlawful, and unconstitutional.
We have a few seconds left.
Yeah, I just want to know about when the process starts. He's hospitalized right now with non-life-threatening injuries, so we're told. When does the process start?
Seconds, Judge.
Very quickly, they will have to decide state jurisdiction in New York or federal jurisdiction in New York.
All right, again, President breaking news, starting the process of terminating the diversity program. You heard Catherine Herridge report on that earlier. He said that diverse lottery, it's not good, it's not nice. He wants to do away with it and get rid of chain migration. The president at the White House just a few moments ago. More Outnumbered in just a moment.